Welcome to Democrats Live. And hey, everybody, our chairman, Tom Perez, is here tonight. What about that?
Good evening.
Don't forget, Resistance Summer is going on. If you want to know everything you need to know about it, you just dial 43367 and text in RESIST. We want to get everybody involved. We want to get everybody up to date on what's going on. And we're also streaming live.democrats.org, where people can also sign up to take action and to donate. Let's hear applause for that, right? Now, look, I don't have to tell you because everybody knows we are fighting to protect health care for the American people right now. If you don't want to see 22 million people, according to the Senate bill, lose their health care, you have got to get on and to makecalls.democrats.org/ACA. That is makecalls.democrats.org/ACA to contact your senator to say, keep people's health care, protect people's health care, don't take people's health care away. What do you guys think? Is this an important thing to be doing? Because we don't believe in cutting Medicaid just so some folks who already have a lot can have even more. And so let me just say, we turn it over to my buddy Tom. Tom, what do you know, man? We got a special guest tonight, do we not?
Amen. It's such an honor to be here, and I'm about an hour removed from being on the steps of the Capitol, right in front of the Capitol with Leader Pelosi, with members of the Senate, because they were going to vote on this terrible bill this week. You know, the House bill was mean. The Senate bill was meaner, and because of the collective power of we, people organizing, that is how we're able to stem the tide for now. But we got a lot more work to do.
That's right.
And Keith, thank you for everything you've been doing, because this Resistance Summer is a down payment in the new DNC. We're all about organizing, and the immediate issue is indeed saving the Affordable Care Act. And one of the main people who was involved in this process was Valerie Jarrett. Valerie is here tonight. We got to give it up for Valerie. This is a very personal privilege to be here tonight with Valerie, because Valerie was not only a friend, she was a mentor. And when you are going to succeed, as President Obama did, you need people around you who know how to deliver. They know what your values are, they know what you need, and they can move forward. Valerie had the president's ear. Valerie had the president's confidence. Valerie continues to have that confidence, and that's because she earned it. She's got game. And, a distinguished career in local government, and as a former local government guy, I love people who are in local government. A lot of people don't know that about Valerie. They just think she was a big shot at the White House. She understood that the rubber hits the road at local government, and a history of looking out for the little guy. That's what her family was all about. That's what she was all about. And that's why I am so excited, Valerie, to have you here tonight on Democrats Live. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Well,
thank you, Tom. And thank you, Keith, for inviting me. I appreciate you both.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things that people often ask, by the way, I miss Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. And, it's not just what they did, but it's how they did it. My mother's name, my late mother's name was Grace, and she carried herself with an amazing grace. And so did the president, not just what he did, but how he did it. And we get the public persona of the president. You knew him when he was
back in the day.
Back in the day, as we say. How did you meet them? How did you meet the president and Michelle Obama?
Well, it's an interesting story. So 26 years ago this month, I had just been appointed Deputy Chief of Staff to Mayor Daley. And you're right, my service in local government taught me so much about representing actually the people's interests, which begins with listening to the people. And as you know from local government, you're right there, and you're responsive to them because they are your neighbors, they have your phone number, they know where you live. And so when I was appointed Deputy Chief of Staff, I was recruiting staff to come and join me in the mayor's office. And somebody sent me a resume of what they said was this terrific, brilliant, talented young lawyer who no longer wanted to practice law in a law firm. And I had become disenchanted with practicing law in a law firm too, so it captivated my interest. Well, her name was Michelle Robinson. So I interviewed her for what was supposed to be a 20-minute interview, and about 10 minutes in, I realized I was no longer interviewing her, she was interviewing me. And it went on for about an hour and a half, and at the end of that hour and a half, I was so impressed, I offered her a job on the spot. I didn't even have the authority to offer her the job, but I did it anyway. So she said, wisely, let me think about it. So a couple days later, we were talking, and I said, well, what about it? Are you going to come and join us here in the mayor's office? And she said, well, my fiance doesn't think it's such a great idea. And I said, well, who is your fiance? So she said, well, his name is Barack Obama, and he began his career as a community organizer. And he therefore is naturally hesitant about me joining the administration, because what if he wants to have a demonstration out in front of City Hall? I would be there. And I said, that's just the point. Yes, you would be there to help us. And she said, well, he's hesitant. Would you be willing to have dinner with us? And so wisely, I said yes. And boy, am I glad I did. And at that dinner, both Barack Obama and Michelle Obama opened up to me about their background and their childhood, and I did the same about mine. And we realized we were raised with the same values. We had been given enormous opportunity, and in return, our families had taught us that to those who much is given, much is expected. And that was the beginning of what turned out to be a really wonderful relationship.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history. And the rest is history.
So that's how you and Barack Obama and Michelle Obama got together. Tell us about your story. You actually have you have a service-oriented family you come from in Chicago. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, sure. So my father was a physician, and my mother is an educator. She founded Ellison Institute, which is an institute focusing on early childhood education, trying to professionalize the field. My dad did, well, it's interesting. When my dad was in the Army and he was looking for a job when he was discharged back in the 50s, he couldn't find a job really at a teaching institution in the United States where he would get pay comparable to his white counterparts.
Sure.
And so my parents decided to look for opportunities outside of the United States. And at that point, the United States and Iran had very good diplomatic relations. Oh, yeah. And the Shah of Iran was trying to help westernize and develop medicine in Iran and share best practices. And so my parents decided to move to Iran, and my father helped start a hospital in Shiraz, Iran, working together with Iranian and French and Canadian and Spanish and British physicians, all living together on a hospital compound together. And I was the second baby born in that hospital.
Amazing, amazing.
And so we lived there until I was 5.
She just announced she's not running for president.
I was not born here. I was not born here. And if we let somebody else be that first baby.
If Ted Cruz can run, you can run too.
I thought
we're going to fight for that.
When Ted announced he was running, I should say Senate, I decided, well, maybe I should do that.
That's right.
But it was a good experience because it taught me a lot about the United States, living outside of the United States. And I think that oftentimes people who live here take our liberties and freedoms and rights and privileges for granted a bit. And so living in a country that was underdeveloped the way Iran was, but also seeing that even though we may be the greatest country on earth, we're not the only country on earth.
That's
and
right.
we can learn a lot from people who have different backgrounds. And my father always said the time he spent in Iran with those physicians from all over the world made him a much better physician.
Right.
And made him a much better person because he learned to listen and to find what he had in common with people who had such different backgrounds.
Steel sharpens steel. It's good to be in colleagues who can keep you sharp and on top of your game.
And that's a similar experience to what President Obama had in the time he was in Indonesia. Again, a country very different than the United States, but it taught him a lot about how to appreciate the United States, but also how to appreciate how the United States fits into the global context.
Our cultural competency and cultural proficiency is our greatest strength.
That's right.
It is what makes America great.
That's right.
Is when we are culturally competent.
But you know, Tom, I can't help but ask this question. So now we're in a period of time when we're not talking about multilateralism and we're not talking about multiculturalism and inclusion. The conversation is taking a different turn from the White House. Any views on how important it is to continue reaching out to the world and continue to understand?
Well, yes, absolutely. In fact, Keith, you'll appreciate this. Last night I went to an Eid celebration.
Oh, yeah.
We had several of the staff at the White House who are Muslim decided to get together and have our own reception, just similarly to the way the LGBT community did a few weeks ago with the Pride Parade. And we decided that, look, the real power is with the American people. And so, sure, it's important to have leadership from the White House, but what's really important is what citizens do.
Yeah.
And so my belief, and I know that you two share it, and that's part of what is the strength of the Democratic Party, is we have a big tent.
That's right.
We have a tent that's inclusive. We have a tent that believes that diversity in our country is a strength. And that's what makes the United States so extraordinary. And it doesn't mean that we're perfect, because we're not. And we're still bending that arc of the moral universe. But our diversity and the fact that people come from all over the world to the United States and are innovators and creators, that comes from all of this, dissonance that you have from people who have these different cultures, all working together towards the common goal of improving our country.
Absolutely.
And so I think our message is, look, we can't sit around and just wait for someone to lead. We have to be the leaders. Each of us in our own communities has to participate in making and feeling that empowerment that you can make your community better.
That's right.
And that's what we've always done, and that's been the strength of this country. And so we can't be dissuaded by what's going on in Washington, because the real power is out in the country.
Power to the people.
Power to the people.
That is a great segue to the matter at hand, which is the Affordable Care Act. I mean, just on a personal level, as someone, I mean, you spent countless hours on this, and you had your ups and downs, and the days where it seemed imminent, and the days where it seemed that it would never happen. And as a result of that persistence, you got through. What goes through your head now as you reflect on these efforts to undermine this critical pillar of our social compact?
Well, first I'd share with you that the night that the Affordable Care Act passed was one of the best moments that I had in the White House. And President Obama invited everybody to come back to the White House and watch it from the White House who worked on it. And I was home with my bowl of popcorn and not inclined to move. And then his assistant said, no, he actually wants everyone to come back. So, of course, I went back. And I'm so glad I did, because in the wee hours of the morning, after it passed, we were up on the Truman balcony. And this is everyone from Vice President Biden to the most junior person who worked on it. And so I said to the president, he looked so happy. I said to him, how does this night compare to election night? Because it was unseasonably warm spring night. And I said, how do you feel tonight compared to that night? And he said something I'll never forget. He said, election night was simply the means to get to tonight, where we could do something for the American people, where we could turn health care into not a privilege, but a right for every American. And I never understood, Tom, why healthcare, affordable healthcare for the American people, turned into a political issue that you would try to make points off of. And it was the first hard lesson of how the Republicans were putting a short-term political interest ahead of what was good for the country. And so the question I ask is, if you look at the bill that passed either the House or the Senate, does it improve the quality of life for the American people? And the answer is it does not. When you throw 22 million people off the rolls, 15 in the first year, when you put at risk pre-existing conditions, where you say you're not going to provide care for maternity and for pre-existing conditions and maternal health care. And what about the senior citizens and the disabled and the people who have opiate addiction who are no longer having the benefit of the Medicaid resources? This is a disaster for the American people. And why? You have to ask yourself why. Shouldn't their first obligation be to improve the quality of life for the American people, not put it at risk? So I don't understand, but I do know this. I do know, as you said earlier, absent the American people getting engaged and involved and calling their senators and their representatives and telling them their story. And I have heard so many stories, as I know have both of you, from people whose lives have been literally saved by the Affordable Care Act.
That's right.
And those are the stories that are going to persuade the elected officials to do what is right for you.
You know, the president had a practice that was a really important practice, which was he got a lot of mail from the American people, and he always made sure that in his book, you know, at the end of the day, the team put in place a representative sample of mail from real people. And it was really important to ground him, because behind every policy initiative, behind every statistic is a real person.
So funny
And-
you would mention it. Should I
Yeah.
share one of those
Yeah.
stories? It's a perfect segue. He received a letter I'll never forget from a young man who said, "Sir, I didn't vote for you in 2008. And I actually worked on Governor Romney's campaign in 2012. And I wanted to let you know that you saved my life. Because I signed up for ACA, and afterwards I was diagnosed with an illness, and I've had 3 surgeries I could not have afforded." And the president actually had lunch with him and talked about it. And this young man looked to the president and he said, "I was a fool. I was so stupid. And I just didn't appreciate what you were trying to do for us." And those are the stories that you hear when you get outside of Washington, outside of the Beltway. People are so reliant on the Affordable Care Act. Should we make it better? Yes, of course we should. But we shouldn't make it worse.
That's for sure.
Well, and you know, your example there is exactly why you look at the polling right now. Republicans and Democrats alike understand that this bill is mean and it's mean-spirited, and it's not even close right now, and that's why they put it off.
To get specific about the polling, we've seen numbers like 12%, 17%. I mean, the people do not like this thing. You know, what do you think? I mean, do you think they would actually really pass this bill, as unpopular as it is, or is this a situation where the dog actually caught the car? You know, where they actually, you know, got something that they didn't think they were going to get, and now they're not sure they want it.
Well, for 7 years, they've been running on this platform of let's repeal and replace ACA.
Oh, yeah.
And we've asked them
Over
for
60.
7 years, well, what's your plan?
Yeah.
Because it's a complicated piece of business and it fits together like a puzzle. You can't say you're going to cover pre-existing conditions unless you have a mandate that everybody sign up.
Yep.
I mean, these things are all related to one another. You can't provide preventive care for women unless you're going to make sure that you have the revenue coming in. And so the question is, given the state of it today, why aren't they doing everything possible to make it work? Already we've seen they're not marketing the ACA. That means that as long as it's the law of the land, they have the responsibility to successfully implement it until that changes. And they're not. They're not doing that. And so the exchanges are suffering. We are hearing from insurance companies that the reason why they're pulling out of some locations and raising their premiums is because of uncertainty.
Right.
The elected officials owe it to them to give them the certainty. Until there is a new plan, this is the law of the land. And we should be trying to make it stronger, not weakening it.
And the Inspector General at the Department of Health and Human Services is investigating whether the administration, HHS, deliberately set forth to tank the exchange.
Well, just something as concrete as marketing dollars. They've cut
Right.
back dramatically on the marketing, and we know how hard it is to reach people where they are. You have to go out and talk to people about the benefits. Everyone's busy, and you can't just expect them to go, yes, let's sign up for this. Government has a responsibility to go out and educate people.
To inform and educate.
To inform and educate.
Keith, what do you remember about
What do I
that
remember?
passage?
For one thing, let me tell you, it was a process. We had like literally hundreds of hearings. Republicans actually were allowed to bring amendments, and some of them passed.
Many of them were included.
143 Republican offered amendments passed in the Senate version of the bill.
And the reason why
143.
is we wanted to make sure that it was a bipartisan effort. And don't forget, it was modeled after Massachusetts.
Well, yeah.
Governor Romney was the governor, Republican governor. It was absolutely modeled after that. And every effort was made to bring it together because we knew it would be stronger if it were bipartisan. But in the end, their leader told them not one vote will go with the president.
You know, Joe Cowell, who was a congressman from New Orleans, is I think the only Republican who voted for it the first time it came out of the House, and the second time he voted against it. He ended up losing his seat. But they were unanimously against it on final passage. But you asked me how I felt.
Yeah.
Boy, I was ecstatic. That day when I saw those numbers click, 218, we all jumped up, we all cheered because we knew what it was going to mean. We knew that people weren't going to have to go bankrupt just because they got sick anymore, man. And in our line of work, we hear healthcare nightmares all the time, whether it's folks going bankrupt, whether it's, I tell you, Tom, I was at the town hall forum a few weeks ago, and this woman told me, she said, I'm 34 years old. My mom died of breast cancer. My mother's sister died of breast cancer. My older sister is symptomatic. And I'm thinking that I am going to have a double mastectomy because if they take health care away, I need to have some kind of assurance. And this woman said something to me that chilled me to my bone. She said, and I'm too young to die. I got a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I have to be around. This is what this
These
woman,
are the choices
this
that
is-
people are facing with right now. Just think of all the senior citizens who rely on nursing homes.
Oh, my God.
Or all of the benefits of Medicaid, and
Yeah.
children with disabilities who are counting on Medicaid. And their parents right now are wringing their hands wondering, what are they going to do?
Well, you know, if you could elaborate just on that for a moment, because not everybody realizes what Medicaid does. You know?
Medicaid has enormous
yeah.
benefits for people with disabilities, for senior citizens, for those who are poor. I mean, to sum up the way I view the proposal that's both in the Senate and in the House is that it is a tax cut for the wealthy on the backs of the poor and the middle class
That's
and
a
the
factual
disabled.
statement. That is
That's
very-
just it. It is that simple. When you look at who is benefiting financially, it is the wealthy, it is it's the industry, it is not the American people. And who's going to suffer? We all are.
I have a very a woman who I met on the Obama campaign, who was one of our assistants during the Obama transition. Remarkable organizer who shall go unnamed. Got married a year or so later. Has 2 children, 2 wonderful boys, and they're both on the autism spectrum.
Right.
And it has changed their lives. And and they're remarkable boys, and they love them dearly and will do anything for them. And their lifesaver is Medicaid, because Medicaid provides services. She has left the workforce to be a full-time advocate. Her husband has a full-time job, and they're eligible for Medicaid because it enables their kids to stay in the home. Without Medicaid, there's a chance that they would have to be institutionalized,
Right.
and there is no parent in the world who wants that to happen to their children. This is what Medicaid does. Ward, the long-haul truck driver from Nashville that I met, March 1st, 2015, he got his coverage. Within weeks, not within months, he got his liver transplant. And I asked Ward, what do you want to do now that you got your health back? Answer, I want to work again.
Here you go.
I want to be a taxpayer.
Yeah.
And
Why
that's- yeah.
why the heck are they making it harder for people to get back and be a taxpayer? You know, a sick nation is not a strong nation. And that is, and by the way, as your former labor secretary, the recession-proof industry in the past 8 years was the healthcare sector.
Right.
And this notion that the Affordable Care Act was a job killer, that is just bunk, plain old bunk. We've added jobs. And what would happen with repeal
That's right.
is we would lose jobs because, you know what? Medicaid is the primary funder for long-term care in this country. And if nursing homes don't have that lifeline, nursing homes don't do it for free.
Oh, it would lead to massive layoffs. I mean, and as labor secretary, I mean, I just, ask you, what does it mean to a family, a working family trying to make it? What component of healthcare makes up their family budget? I mean, I guess I'm asking you, how does a family make it in America when they don't have healthcare access, or that they have a lifetime limit or annual limit, which can devastate
Well,
them?
the emergency room becomes their primary care physician. My brother's an ER doc.
Yeah.
And they've seen when people get access to preventive care, everybody wins. The ER should not be people's primary care physicians.
Absolutely.
Because that's the train wreck. An ounce of prevention is very real, and that is what is so unconscionable. But I think the big moral of the story, and we're going to go to questions now, because we got a lot of them, is, this president was a guy who never gave up. And I watch all these people out there.
This
and
president being President Obama.
President Obama.
Okay, just
There's only one
just so we
president.
know who we're talking about here.
There's only one president for me.
44 is who we're talking about.
44, Team 44. And, when I talk to you, Valerie, we both are, understandably concerned, but I always sense whenever I talk to you, and it's kind of like going to the gas station, she fuels my tank because she understands that he has the White House, but we've got a much better weapon, and that weapon is
democracy. Look,
Nope.
I think part of this, and I'm looking at this audience, and most of you were young, as I was teasing you about earlier, but the three of us have been around long enough to know that our democracy, to fight for it, has never been easy. I mean, it has always been a struggle. If you just look back through the history of our nation, there are people who have sacrificed mightily in order for us to have the civil rights and liberties that we have today, including the Affordable Care Act. And so just because it's tough right now doesn't mean we give up. When it's tough is when you double down. You ask the people who crossed that bridge in Selma, who were beat up, whether they were going to give up fighting for our right to vote. They weren't. And so our task ahead is daunting, sure, but I am optimistic because I look around and I see the sparkle and the enthusiasm and the passion in each and every one of you. And you are what gives me hope. You are the power.
So Adrian, we got some folks calling in, huh?
Got a ton of questions.
Oh, let's do
Okay,
something.
The first few are about healthcare. Nancy from New York asked, what's the status of Trump Care in the Senate? Is there a committee that's working on tweaking the current bill? I know it's been delayed. Thank you.
Well, let me just say one thing, then Tom alluded to it earlier, and then perhaps I'll defer to actually the member of the House who might have some insight into the Senate. But in contrast to what we did, I mean, we had hundreds of meetings. We made hundreds of amendments. It was all very transparent. The president had a great meeting where he invited in the Republicans for an open press session to answer all of their questions. It was a collaborative effort. The intent was to make it bipartisan, and the intent was to be open and honest with the American people. Our scoring was put out for everybody to see because we wanted people to understand before a decision was made what was at stake and what we were trying to accomplish. Right now, everyone was scurrying around this week to read a very long and complicated bill, and the question you have to say was, if they're proud of it, why were they hiding it behind closed doors?
Oh, yeah.
And my real hot button is, why were 13 men in a room deciding about health care that impacts my life? You have 21 women in the Senate. They couldn't have picked one of those women to be there. And so, of course, they were thinking about taking away maternity care. Well, now they're hearing from women all over the country, well, don't do that. Well, if they'd had a woman on the committee, they wouldn't have made that mistake.
That's right.
So I don't know where it is other than they'd said they were going to vote on it this week, and now they've said they're going to put it off. Maybe
Well,
you know more.
they yanked it because they're missing somewhere between 5 and 7 folks. I mean, they're not that far away, and the problem they have is, if they make it a little meaner, then they're going to lose people who are in close districts. If they make it a little nicer, they're going to lose the people who want it meaner. So I mean, they have this problem that they're trying to thread this needle. But I'm going to tell you, keep on fighting, keep on resisting, keep on putting yourself out there, because they know that they have promised that they're going to repeal so much that if they fail to do it, the world is going to notice. So I say keep up the fight.
Well, and I think, this was a good week in the sense that we delayed it.
Yeah.
But there is no one spiking the football because they will come back. There's no doubt about it. I applaud Senator Schumer. He did something today, I think it was, that was very important. He said to the president, bring us all over. Bring a bipartisan group over to Blair House. Let's discuss health care in America. Let's have an open discussion about whether we can improve the bill. I suspect that invitation will not be accepted because they don't want to improve the Affordable Care Act.
You know, Tom, the whole time, man, we have been saying, if you want to work on it, let's work on it. We got ideas too. They have never said, let's make it better. They have only said, let's repeal it. And by the way, I had the misfortune of voting against their repeal bills over 60 times. So you're absolutely right.
Over the last 7 years.
Over the last
they just
7
kept
years.
bringing it back, repeal.
Hey,
Well,
they shut the
and-
government down for 16
Remember
days over
them?
this. Man, I do.
Well, and one of them got to the
I'm
president.
traumatized over that.
They had no compunction last year. They finally got a bill that they got sent to the president's desk on repeal that he vetoed.
Yep.
And now that they're the dog that caught the car, I mean, what's happened between then and now is the American people finally figured out what's in the bill.
Right.
They didn't realize that their 25-year-old millennial living in their basement was able to stay on their health plan because of the Affordable Care Act. They
That's
didn't
right.
realize that their diabetic daughter was able to get care or insurance because of the Affordable Care Act. And now that folks understand it, they realize how important it is.
And those lifetime and annual caps,
Oh,
people
yeah.
who are sick, who have chronic illnesses, their
Cancer.
health care was running out right when they needed it the most. And this isn't just the people who are in the exchanges, this is everybody. I mean, that's part of what the benefit of the Affordable Care Act is it prevented the insurance companies from putting in place annual and lifetime caps. It prevented them from discriminating against people with pre-existing conditions. And to women in the audience, we were born with a pre-existing condition because we were paying higher premiums. All of that was prohibited under the Affordable Care Act.
And
Why
just
isn't that good?
And one more thing before we move over to Adrian, under the Republican version, they'll allow people between 50 and 64 to pay up to 5 times as much as a younger person, which that was capped at 1 to 3
Exactly.
to 1 in the previous bill. And these are folks who are nearing retirement, having to pay more and more without regard to their health.
Fixed
Adrian?
income.
So speaking of working together, we had a few questions. Christine and James from Facebook asked, when will the party put together a bill to shore up and improve the ACA and to build on the progress we made with it?
Oh, we've offered that for some time. I mean, I know, I'll give you one example of something the president talked about, President Obama, the real president. And that was, you know, if Ted Kennedy had not passed away, we would have had the ability to fix things in the Affordable Care Act that we knew we needed to fix. One example was we would have, had we had Senator Kennedy, fixed a provision that if you work less than 30 hours, then you're not eligible. It is currently a cliff. If we had the opportunity to fix it, we would have made it a staircase. So it would have ramped down. So if you were working 25 hours a week, you still would have had eligibility. It would have been prorated down to a certain amount. That's an example of a common sense fix that would be a win-win situation. But the problem is, in the core, the nub of the issue in 2009, 2010 is what Mitch McConnell said day one, which is, I want Barack Obama to be a one-term president. So I don't care if the American people are hurt. I want him to be a one-term president. So common sense went out the window. And the challenge we have here is we've got ideas on how to improve the Affordable Care Act, but they don't want to hear them. That's why they do it in secret, because this is not a health care bill. It's a tax cut bill masquerading as a health care bill. So they don't want to amend the health care bill because it's a tax cut bill.
You are so right. I mean, if they really were focusing on the American people, they would do something about the costs of medication. There's nothing in there that addresses the exorbitant costs of medication in our country.
And just on that score, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, I like to call it.
Yes.
Patient Protection, first words in the title. It helped fill in the donut hole. What does that mean? So if you're a senior and you have a prescription drug benefit, up till about $2,500, you'll get help. Then from $2,500 to about $5,000, you're on your own, and then after that, you'll get some help again. The Affordable Care Act helped fill in the donut hole so that seniors facing, and you'd hit that donut hole sometime around like September, if you're in it, and folks were cutting pills, they were skipping days. They want to repeal all that, and they have, and so this is really a serious issue when it comes to these drugs. Insulin is spiking, Daraprim is spiking. These are serious drugs to save people's lives. Adrian?
Next one's for Tom. It's Gloria in Georgia asked, what can be done to help middle-class workers after working hard all these years? What can we look forward to in retirement?
Well, that is a great question, and I want to start by thanking both the president and Keith Ellison, because we worked on this issue together. Retirement security is part of the basic bargain with the middle class. And, when I was a kid, you'd work 30 years, you'd get a party, and a pension at the end of that 30 years, and you didn't have to worry about how to invest it because it was what we called a defined benefit pension, a defined benefit plan. And so they figured out at your employer how to invest it, and you had that money for life, and when you passed away, your spouse would keep it. And then we switched to the world of 401ks and IRAs, and that's a different world, because now you are in control of your destiny. And what that means is that you have to, you've saved $100,000 toward your retirement. Now you've got to make a judgment about how to invest that. And you've got to talk to someone. Now when you go to your lawyer or your doctor, They have a legal and ethical obligation to put your best interests first. Financial advisors don't. That's nuts. They have an obligation to look at what's suitable for you. Well, if I had cancer and I went to the doctor and they told me that this treatment was suitable, I'd say, what the hell are you talking about? I want you to save my life. And the industry fought this. There were courageous leaders in the industry who said this is the smart thing to do and the right thing to do. Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, among them. But there were folks who kept fighting it. And we won, and we've won in court. But this is another example of the Trump folks. The rule is still in place because we continue to win in court. But boy, if they had their druthers, they'd get rid of it in a heartbeat. There's a retirement crisis looming in America.
That's right.
There's a third of Americans who don't even have any savings at all. And you know what's going to happen? They're going to have to rely on Social Security and nothing else, and that's not enough. And then they will be on Medicaid. But wait, if you repeal the Affordable Care Act and make it harder to get on Medicaid, you're going to be that much more destitute. The Democratic Party has always stood for working people. When we worked hard to make sure if you work overtime, you got paid overtime, that you could retire with dignity. And some of the first things they did was to undo things we did in the retirement space. And I don't get that. Why do you want to make it harder for people to retire with dignity? Why do you want to make it harder for people who are working to work in a safe working environment? That makes no sense. And what we have to do as Democrats is to make sure we're communicating not only what they're doing, but what we stand for. That's why I love working with the likes of Keith Ellison, because he fought for us, when we were doing this. And he's continuing that fight with his dual hats. And that is very helpful. But I really appreciate that question, because this Donald Trump said that I'm going to help raise your salary. But then on the other hand, he said a low minimum wage is not a bad thing for America. And I judge people by what they're doing now. And what we have seen is an unmitigated
at the library, but the part of it that I think he's most excited about is the future. And so he wants to train all of the young people who want to go out and make the world better, both here in the United States and around the world, and to create this platform where exciting new ideas will sprout out, and then how do you take those ideas for scale? Now, he isn't the only one who's going to be doing that. The DNC is training young people as well. We want to get young people to run for office, get them excited about running for office, give them... And I will say, since January, as I've traveled around the country and visited organizations that are working on getting people to really get excited about running, I have seen enormous enthusiasm. And not just running for office also, but participating in their government. I was out in San Francisco a few weeks ago, and a woman said to me that she'd been to 2 city council meetings in the last month in her hometown. She'd never been to a city council meeting before. That's part of it. You have to get educated by going and finding out what happens in your local government. Go to your state government. Let's look at what we're doing with the way that the lines are drawn, that they've been so gerrymandered that we have a Congress that doesn't actually represent the people. There's a big education that has to be a part of our efforts, and I think both the Obama Center, the DNC, a host of organizations are interested in helping excite and train and empower the next generation, because we're counting on you.
All right, we are counting on you. I think we can get one more in, Adrian.
Yep, we've got one more. Bill from Facebook said, this is also for Valerie, what is the simple phrase, sentence, or bullet that clearly conveys the vision of the Democratic Party? So I think everyone has thoughts on that.
Yes, we can.
All right. Very good one.
That's great. Yeah, I do have one more.
The answer was so quick, we could probably get it.
That was amazing.
Yeah, no.
Gloria from California said, our president has announced that he is reducing Social Security and eliminating food stamps. As a 78-year-old senior who worked since I was 16 and paid my fair share of taxes, I am now living primarily on a Social Security income of $1,400, which hasn't been increased in several years, and on food stamps. How am I going to survive with the current administration slashing of the benefits that I paid for my entire life?
And don't forget about the home heating assistance, light heat, another very important.
And
program.
Meals on Wheels.
The social safety net that the American people have the right to depend on when they need it. And that story is such a poignant one, because imagine you've worked hard your whole life. I've met people who have retired and are still paying back their student loans. Now imagine that. I'm saying this to the young people in the room. You work your whole life and you've retired and you still have debt. We really have to ask ourselves, who are we as a country? And I think Vice President Biden used to always say, your budget reflects your values. And so look closely at the budget. Look closely at these bills that we've been talking about, because it's all about values. And we have to fight for the values we believe in.
You know, our strength as a nation lies in no small measure in our compassion, and it always has. And when I hear Gloria and meet the Glorias of the world out there, we can do better as a nation. We're the richest nation on the planet. We have the best workforce on the planet. We are best positioned of any country in the world to thrive in the 21st century and beyond. We have always led with optimism and inclusion. And to hear someone who has worked hard, played by the rules, talking about her struggles, that's just not fair. And that's what we're fighting for as a democratic family. Fairness. That's what it's all about, a fair shake and dignity. Gloria is entitled to dignity.
Exactly.
As we head into the final moments of the show, I did want to just point out that one of the proud moments of the many proud moments of the Obama administration was when you signed the Paris Climate Accords. And of course, we now know what the current president has done about that. Any final thoughts to our young people in the studio audience tonight and everybody listening out there on Facebook? What we might want to keep in mind about fighting for climate justice?
Well, don't give up. And I was heartened to see former Mayor Bloomberg of New York decide to lead an effort of mayors and business folks who are every bit as committed to that climate deal as they were before. And yes, it's a void to have the President of the United States walk away, but there's so much more to our country than just the President of the United States.
A lot of cities, a lot of states.
Lots of cities and our mayors. You know, I love the mayors. They are behind this 100%. They're already working to implement their commitments. And so we got to give them a shout out too. And so everybody in your home communities, ask your mayor, are you behind this deal? And if he is, support him or her for that. Ask the businesses, are you behind this deal?
Right.
And we have countless, from small businesses to Fortune 10 companies, who are all saying, we stand behind this deal. So we need to keep moving, and we need to think about, and maybe it's too early for you all, but I'm very mindful of wanting to leave this planet better off for my grandchildren.
Oh, hey, everybody.
That's what it's all about.
Hey, everybody. Let me tell you, if you want to be a part of the live studio audience for Democrats Live, if you find yourself in Washington, D.C., you just call us up here at the DNC. On behalf of the DNC and our chairman, Tom Perez, and our wonderful guest, Valerie Jarrett.
Thank you.
Hey, look, if you guys want to help save the ACA, go on over to makecalls.democrats.org/ACA and tell that senator not to kick 22 million people off their health care. We will be back on July 11th with Senator Al Franken. And don't forget, Resistance Summer, 43367, text resist. That's it for us tonight, everybody.
That was fun. Thank you for having me. You guys are great. Wish you could just come around.